Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My guest tonight is an executive member of the SRVEA, which is the union that represents the teachers. She is a hybrid teacher. She volunteered to go back right away. She's a fantastic speaker, and I really enjoyed my time talking to her about the nuances of everything they had to go through to get the students back on campus, hearing about the incredible results that they're getting, having students there, connecting with them again, helping them work through things, and just hearing about the struggle. The hybrid and the remote learning situations have not been easy for anyone, teachers least of all, and it was very refreshing to hear somebody who's obviously so intensely committed to making it work and getting great results. But without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Kathy Crosthwait. The thing with teenagers is this. Okay. I've thought about this a lot. Teenagers can make you pay for giving them consequences. Like if they do something wrong, they may even know they've done something wrong. But they're like, I'm grounded, but I'm going to make my mom's life hell.
Who's actually getting punished on that one? That's going to be...
Right.
As your kids get older, you will find that more and more.
That's the whole nature of this hurts me more than it hurts you. It actually does. Because I see my students, like, you guys have not stopped socializing and doing everything, because even if your parents tried to get you to stop, you know you can just rein it, like you can just make every meal, every passing in the hallway just nails on a chalkboard. I don't know how you've survived.
And they know what makes you so frustrated too. So like, I'll leave my dishes in the sink and I'll make you call me, and I'll have my door closed and I'll hear you, but I'm going to make you call me again and again till you have to come upstairs and pound on my door to get me to do those dishes. Oh, it's painful, the whole thing.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for taking time away from the dishes to come and chat with me.
Yeah, night away from dishes isn't bad.
Not away from dishes. So you're back, right?
Yes.
You're back in person in class, which is great. You got COVID, got over it.
Yeah.
Right? Thankfully, nobody got infected.
Yes.
There was no transmission.
Mild cases, sure.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
how is it being back after the long sleep?
Oh gosh, it's awesome. And I would say too, I think that most teachers, we all just want to have the kids back. And so for me, having students in the classroom is, first of all, it's great because of the constant feedback you get, the energy of being around other people versus teaching at a screen is completely different. With a mask, I have definitely learned to make my stink eye a little bit wider, so because they can't see from your nose down. So like the snarl that may have accompanied that eye no longer is there. But it's so great. And it's also, I think, from a learning and teaching piece, I get to walk around the classroom and say, oh, look, you didn't get that right. Yes. Oh, look, let's talk about this one. Or kind of get in a little bit closer and say, hey, take another look at number 2. Which, when you're through a screen, I wasn't seeing their work for 2 weeks.
You would see it at all? Would they have to send it into you?
Yeah, so every 2 weeks we had a bag drop off and pick up. So it was like we would prepare the 2 weeks of paper, pencil, worksheets, workbooks, projects, art, whatever it was, and it would go into a big shopping bag, and then you would take it to the multipurpose room, and there would be one day that kids would come and they would drop off their 2 weeks of work, and then they would pick up the bag for the next 2 weeks.
God, the logistical nightmare that you guys must have gone through to get everybody the work, to pick up their work, to go through it all. And especially if you're trying to go through 2 weeks worth of work, not only must that be incredibly infuriating, because you'll see a mistake that maybe the student started making at the beginning of the first week, and it just progresses all the way through. And now you're like, well, this kid solidified this bad habit, and now I'm going to have to try to fix it, and I'll only see if it works in 2 weeks when I get his new packet of material.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely that piece, and we were trying to do some online pieces with Google Forms and fill this out today, and then I can get some feedback. But some of that you're just getting what's the answer to this problem versus how did you solve it. And I teach fifth grade. They're getting to the place where they're pretty savvy on technology, and this situation has certainly amplified that. And so I know there were kids that might have had a calculator open to the side, and if they knew how to do the work and were able to use a calculator at some points, I was like, well, it's impressive. They could make that happen. They could figure it out, multi-steps, all of those things. But at the same point, there is nothing better than looking at an actual student's work. We have our first in-person big math test next week, and we were talking about it, and one of the kids said, so is it going to be online? Are we going to be doing it? Because they do half the day with me, but then they do go home, and they are accountable for this asynchronous work. And so one of them said, are we going to be doing it online, or are we going to be doing it during our asynchronous time? Like, oh no, you're going to be right here in this classroom. We're going to talk it through if you have questions. And there was like silent cheering, kids like raising their arms like, whew, thank goodness we are. And it's so weird to think that they would be excited to take a paper pencil test.
Right.
But they also were cheering because I said, and now we can give you partial credit. Because I can, and they're like, yeah, all right, our math scores are going through the roof now. So, it's those kinds of little things. And then the first day we had recess was one of those, it was the first day, and I had brought some kids back, brought each of my cohorts back for an after school to just come on in, see the classroom, let's see each other in person. We did some STEM activities and some art and did some things. And then I took them out to play, and I bought these pool noodles so we could play 6-foot tag. So they would run around and so they get, we had to have lots of rules. You don't poke the person or slap them with this pool noodle. But it's pretty hysterical that they are running and they're like, oh, I got you, poking each other with the pool, which in fifth grade, poking someone with a pool noodle can still be funny and fun and all that. I think maybe when they get to middle school, it might not be as fun, but... I
mean, I'm picking up some pool noodles for me and my wife. You got to do something. When you have kids at home all day long, you got to do something to entertain yourself. And pool noodles might be it.
That might be. And it was great because it was one of the... And I know... Looking at now, so I have 28 students, 14 that come in the morning and 14 that come in the afternoon. And I know that a lot of them were not going out and having big social gatherings with friends. And so for them, coming back to school opened that up. They don't have cars. They're not driving. They're not teenagers. They're kids that are with their parents, and lots of their parents are working. And lots of their parents, just like I was, are nervous about this pandemic that we're in and what should my kids do. But then when we got them on campus and they got to be kids and run around, and they were smiling and laughing, and then we come in from recess and everybody grabs their water bottles and we head outside and spread out, and we call it the big gulp, where everybody takes their masks off and we're really far apart and we take big gulps of water. And like, those are the things that nourish you as a teacher. And I just know that the kids are benefiting so much from the physical being with each other and that interaction. And so much growth happens when you just are understanding, how do I get along with people? And that's a huge part of elementary school. How do I negotiate conflict? How do I stick up for myself? Or maybe if I think my teacher might be wrong, how can I say that in a nice, kind way that will get me to a place of better understanding? So all of those things have been amazing and awesome.
Yeah, one of the things you just said, that in the absence of in-person interactions, you lack the feedback, which I couldn't agree with more. That's probably the most painful aspect of virtual education from a teacher standpoint. Like, there's no teacher who, well, I assume no real teacher would say, hey, I just want to talk some trash. I just want to say whatever I'm going to say. I have no desire to see the look on the kids' faces, or hear if they laugh, or hear if they're upset. Like, I'm just going to say whatever I'm going to say, and it doesn't matter. You need, if you have any expectation of being a good teacher, you need that instantaneous and constant feedback so you can adjust yourself as, it's like you build the plane while you're flying, right? Like, you're working through it and you have some curriculum, but then you modify as you go. And then figuring out, I've been thinking so much about our community in general, because now we're coming out of this, right? Thank God. And we're coming out of it, and we're going to have to start relating to each other again, right? And one of the things you were saying, that we've been kind of segregated, right? People were very worried. We had only one or two forms of communication, and those were really just online. And we all lacked feedback, right? It was incredibly to our detriment, because once you get real feedback from a human being, once you're standing in front of somebody, even if they're saying something you dislike, like odds are, if you're on one side and somebody else is on the other, and they're very passionate about this, you could see just the way they're saying things, or you could hear hesitations in their voice, or if they were very emotional about something, you'd realize you're like, oh, I'm talking to a human being. And this human being has had these very distinct experiences, and those sound horrible, actually. If I let go of my own kind of mission of getting something accomplished, whether I want to go back or whether I want to stay, remote, we're all human beings. And that feedback from each other, it's going to be the core of what brings us back as a community.
Sure, and I think that schools can be huge unifiers for that.
100%. Oh my gosh, yes.
And so much so that we've already at our school just started talking, how do we do that? How do we get PTA and teachers connected? Because that's our parents, right? How do we get our Ed Foundation connected with teachers? Because once parents, and I would say too, the people that are really involved in our schools and are connected with teachers and staff are really understanding of the, I don't know, I guess all of the challenges that come along with this. It's a train wreck.
Who planned on this? Right? Like, who had the protocol set up? Who could even deal with the constantly changing recommendations and guidelines and conflicting guidelines? I mean, you have county, you have state, you have federal. It's kind of like, who could even navigate these things?
Yeah, and we were kind of joking the other day about how we've had 3 first days of school. We had our first day in August, which everybody was remote. And then after January, when the classes got shuffled, we had another first day of school because I had 10 new students. I had 10 go because they made the decision to stay remote, and I was going to be a hybrid teacher. So I had 10 new students join my class. So there's another first day. And then we've got our first day of hybrid when we're all actually physically there. So we were kind of laughing about, that word that we hate right now, pivot, is really just, okay, change to this. And it's been this, musical chairs kind of thing that we've all been doing to try and keep all the balls in the air so we can make this work for the kids too.
Right. That's so, I had never thought about the adults. I always assumed that schools, especially elementary schools, are really just a mixing of kids, and then whatever kind of foundation you set up for the kids, they kind of go home and regurgitate, and it's like, oh, well, this is working, or oh, it's not, whatever. But having that connection with, say, the PTA, right, the parents and the teachers, and then getting the Ed Fund set up, and God, the backlash that people have towards the public schools with things like the Ed Fund and boosters, it's really gonna, it's almost like people got so worked up that they're kind of like, I'm not going to support any of this. I don't even care. And I understand people had very, very limited voices, so they felt whatever capacity they had to affect something, they were going to affect. And for instance, the Boosters Fund, I was talking to the head of the Boosters Fund at San Ramon today. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, it's going to be a train wreck, because here she's in charge of trying to raise money and increase courses, for instance, right? Yeah. They do a tremendous job of increasing the number of courses. You might have, say, one pre-calc course. And it's like, well, if you're taking pre-calc and you're taking, say, a fine art, like you're in band or something, maybe those conflict and you can't take pre-calc. So the Boosters comes along. They raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. They add an enormous number of classes every single year. So now it's like, oh no, we have a second option for pre-calc, or we have a second option for calc, or we have this, that, or the other. So they add all of these classes that are not funded by the school district that make the school, they make San Ramon so great, where students don't have to pick between being in band. I was in band. I loved band. And say going into a pre-calc class. Right. But people got so frustrated that they said, well, look, I'm not going to support any of this, right? And her task coming up is going to be getting people back to the table and saying, look, I understand this hasn't been good for anyone. Definitely not my fault, right? Definitely, like,
Sure.
this woman had no say over any of this. But she said what will have to happen, obviously, is people become engaged again. People become connected again. People, understand who this person is and who that person is, and have relationships again that are functional and prosperous and help students thrive.
Right.
Because it's all going to come down to the parents coming, and teachers and administrators, everybody coming back to the table and saying, okay, this has not been great.
Yeah.
But who wants a second pre-calc class?
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting because at the elementary level, and I have to say, and I've heard from several sources, at Sycamore, we have been very lucky in that we have, at the elementary level, it's not classes, it's paraeducators, right? So it's classroom assistants who are just, we are lucky. We have highly qualified, amazing people. And so for us, parents have put up some money that we were able to get. I've got 4 hours a week that a para works with my students in their asynchronous time.
Oh, that's tremendous.
It's
So even
so
when you're not with
amazing.
them,
Yeah.
somebody's working with them.
So my
Look at
morning group has to go home at lunchtime. 10:30. They go home and they have lunch, and then they're supposed to be working for at least hour and a half, 2 hours. And so what we've done is we've infused time where our paraeducator hosts a Zoom classroom. At this certain time, the 14 kids who are now at home get together with her and they do social studies, which in the 2.5 hours that I'm with them is something that unfortunately has been something where I've said, you know what, guys, I'm going to give you the assignment. Mrs. Daiwan's going to help you. If you have questions, we can do it on Monday after school. But in the 2.5 hours, we're doing math, we're doing reading, and we're doing writing, and maybe a little bit of a social thing or something like that. But that's kind of our time. We've only got 2.5 hours. So we were able to build her in to our schedule, and all of the 5th grade teachers are doing it that way. And so it's been amazing. It's also been like, hey, I see you, Jimmy, you're not showing up to that, and you're not right. So, I mean, there's pieces of that, but at least then I'm able to say this person is with you and working with you. So the parents have definitely, we just had our online auction close, and I'll be interested to see how it does. But I mean, we were ready to have, because every other year at Sycamore, we do the big full auction where everybody goes and it's a night of dinner and dancing. And it was scheduled.
People dance? Can people still dance? Is that a thing?
The teachers leave for that portion. We try to come for the happy hour and say thank you, thank you, thank you, and then we let the parents, right?
I could drink a gin and tonic. I can't dance to save my life.
I don't know. I think the dancing is after people have had lots of beverages and spent all their money, and now they
turn down the lights. It's just like go twitch on the dance floor.
So, but it is, and I think it's an amazing. It's an amazing thing that the schools in this valley do. And we were ready to have our big live auction, deposits, all that stuff. Everything was ready, and then COVID hit in the spring. And so I think a lot of schools were in the same place we were, that we were just kind of stuck. Because you make these commitments to pay for all of these people, and then if you don't have the money, you have to start laying people off. And so I think that's where a lot of schools were as we headed into the fall. But then some schools, like ours, were able to bring those people back through fundraising and that. So it is hard. And I think the other piece that you hit on is bringing people back together. Right now, we can't even be on the campus together. Like our front gates are closed with a sign that says, only students beyond this point. Right. If you need us in the office, call us, here's the number. And then maybe one of the women in the office will come out and help you address what you need. But there aren't even parents walking into our front office right now, which is also another, we just had conferences and they were all virtual conferences. Right. They were great and I loved them. But at the same time, it's not the same as welcoming people into your classroom.
Right. You need feedback, even the way somebody's sitting.
Yep.
Right. Like if you're working with somebody and they're, leaning forward and they're, you can tell they're attentive, or somebody's just sitting back or very rigid, and you're kind of like, okay, we're not connecting here. There's something going on. It's so difficult. And when you're dealing with children's educations, you just can't miss those things. Right. Because if a parent is just too annoyed or too soft-spoken or non-confrontational that they don't even want to address the issues, and you can't see that there's something there. God, it's really, really tough. I mean, the vast majority of my parents I don't even meet anymore because they don't come in, right? Because it's essentially only students in here, and the only way I connect with them is I have to email them every single week. This is exactly what we're doing. This is how your kid's doing. And eventually, in like the third or fourth week, they start opening up like, oh, okay, this is going well. I'm getting feedback from the kid. I'm getting your notes. And they start asking questions and stuff. But developing that relationship in the absence of personal contact is such a difficult thing.
And imagine, too, connecting with families and parents, and I call them the kids' home team. Connecting with a home team when you've got kids who shut their cameras off.
Right.
And they're always muted. And your point about like hearing a little giggle or a little, when they're in person, no matter what, you're going to hear it. But the mute button is like my enemy as a teacher because I can't hear anything. Like I love not hearing the people vacuuming. I like the mute button for that. But when someone's like, oh, you don't hear that.
Right.
Until they're sitting with you and there is no mute. So that's
there's an aspect of social contagion that I think plays very much into teaching, like yawning. Okay, so if you have somebody in a group and yawn, everybody else kind of starts yawning, and nobody really knows why. It was like, what's going on? I had this girl in here. Her name was Peyton. Right, goes to Los Lomas, and Peyton's a crack up. So I had her in here, and it was over. I think it was like September or something. And she would sit in the chair right next to you. And she came in, and in the first 30 seconds, I dropped a joke. And she let out this, like, this chuckle, right? And her laugh was so infectious that other students kind of started smiling. And by the end of the first day, we were crushing. And she was the icebreaker, right? Because she felt comfortable enough to laugh and enjoy herself. Other people started changing the way that they interacted with everything going on. And when you have that, even in a class, right? So I'd be on Zoom, okay, trying to teach people, and I'd be trying so hard to make these ridiculous jokes, and even if people were laughing, unless they looked at the screen to see if anyone else was laughing, nobody could hear. And I made everybody have their cameras on and microphones on, unless there was literally somebody vacuuming behind them. So even that, it was kind of like, it was just, the delay is just not. You can't get it. You can't get that social contagion. You don't get a group dynamic, and because of that, you lose a big piece of the, hey, we're all in this together. Let's all move together. And talking about people saying things under their breath, they're like, oh, I get it. And you're like, yeah, Johnny, right? And you're like, oh, I get it now. And then somebody else will say, wait, hang on, go back one more time. So you have students helping students even if they're not intending to.
Yeah, and it is, and you talk about clues and social clues too, just the whole, is it my turn to talk? And when you're on the screen, it's so hard because there is that delay. So someone might say something, someone else starts to talk, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, no, you go," and then you've lost the momentum.
It's over. The moment's over.
Yeah. You're like, forget it, we're done.
It's like that scene from Pulp Fiction when what's her name?
Gosh, Uma Thurman?
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so Uma Thurman's says she's going to make the joke, and John Travolta's like, what's the joke? And she's like, oh, it's too built up now. And he's like, well, and then she refuses to tell him. It's the exact same kind of thing. And with the tech layering over people's voices, so one voice gets prioritized and the other voice doesn't. What an infuriating thing. I mean, I have no idea if it's the first person talking stays talking, or if it's the person who's talking the loudest, but it's a train wreck when you're trying to actually chat with people.
Well, and it's funny now because as a hybrid teacher, I have students in my classroom on a typical week, Tuesday through Friday. Monday's remote. It's the only time I have all 28 kids together. And it is interesting because every Monday I'm like, man, I hate that stupid remote. And I wish everybody just came to school on Mondays and we didn't have to do that. But you realize how much you lose. Yes. And I have some colleagues that are teaching full remote. And they're funny because a couple days a week, they've still got to do their bags because they've got to get the kids. They've got their 2-week trade-off. And they'll come in to prep their bags, and they'll teach from their classroom that day because they can do the work in their room at breaks or lunch or whatever. And they'll always come by and just pop in and be like, "Hi, guys. How you doing?"
People.
I know.
People
And
in a class.
it's so, and at the end of the day, she'll always come in and be like, I really wish I had kids. And then I'll do the same. Like sometimes she'll be in her room and I'll be at lunch because our lunches are a little bit different. And I'll like run behind the screen and be like, "Hey, everybody, how's it going?"
You're doing the running man in the background.
Yeah. And it's funny because then as soon as I enter the room, she's got to put a mask on because I've got a mask on. And she has some of my students because they stayed remote. And so then I'll be like, "Hey, how you doing on your math? Are you right?" Like through the screen. And it's so hard. And she came in the other day and just said, "This is so hard because the kids they're at a place now where it's spring and more of the cameras are off. You can't get them on. More of the, they're muted. They can't come. They're not turning them on. And it's heartbreaking because you think about, and I feel for the parents who are, because then what are we doing is we're reaching out to parents saying, "Please help. This is what we're noticing is happening." And the parents are saying, I got to work. And I'm that person. I leave my house. Even when we were teaching remotely, as soon as we had the opportunity to go into the classroom, I was going into the classroom because my two teenagers were like, "You are so loud when you are teaching and you are in the dining room and my husband's in the guest room and they're in their bedroom." They were just like, "I just can't, you're so loud. I can't even focus." And so then I took my show on the road and went to school. But just the physical going to somewhere to do your work is huge as well.
Yeah, I never even tried to do it from home. I mean, I have really little boys, right? So I have 3 kids. So there's no way I was going to get any work done at home. But I would always come here. It was terrible, too. I was in here. I had, like, bags of potato chips everywhere. I gained, like, 14 pounds. But you're in here, and it's like I'm all by myself. And it's like I'm talking on this mic, and these kids are not responding. It's amazing how the experience hasn't been great for anyone, but it's amazing how everybody failed to realize, and I shouldn't say everybody, that's an exaggeration. I think it's very easy to forget that the systems we had in place in February 2020 were not designed even an inch for what we were about to experience. Like I found out what Zoom was on a Saturday and I was full remote on Sunday. I happened to have my entire program on a PDF, so I figured out a way. I'm like, well, I guess I could like do this thing with an iPad. I had all these wires. I had no idea what wires were supposed to, nothing was working right. And I figured it out really fast, but no system was designed for this.
No.
Right. And even like what you're saying, like I'm trying to teach from my dining room, and you'll hear people. I've had friends recently criticize some teachers, and I'm not saying all teachers have done the best job. And some teachers have said, yeah, this teacher logs in from, he's sitting on his couch, or he's eating a sandwich, or he's doing this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, first off, I'm usually always eating with my students in my classroom. So the fact that somebody's eating a sandwich is not the worst thing in the world. And second, what if he doesn't actually have a dining table, right? Or what if his dining table is covered with all this stuff? Or what if somebody else is working there? He's on his couch. His life, I guarantee you, was not designed to be this, transmission hub for education. Nor did he sign up for this. Like, what teacher going into work is like, hey, do you want to stare at a screen all day and just totally not connect with students you're trying to help? That sounds great.
Well, and it's funny because you think about, like, we've also been kind of talking about just, we didn't realize how constricting a mask would be.
Yes.
And so we were joking before about how, you as a teacher, you've got a really good stink eye. And you can, someone's misbehaving, you give them the stink eye and it's over. But, especially 10-year-olds. But now I can give them the stink eye. I've got to make it bigger. I've got to kind of enlarge it. All of everything is bigger. My mannerisms are bigger. Everything is bigger because I've lost half my face.
The act is completely magnified.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because what then happens is you get out of breath and you're like, because you're dancing around. So the mask is in my face. And so, so there's a couple of us who are like, man, this is giving me a workout every day because I'm trying. And so now we're like trying to find what are the best masks that we can get the best airflow through. And thank goodness most of us are getting, on the road to fully vaccinated, which is also just amazing. But I think to your point about what we signed up for, I think that's the part that I will say, are they doing what they used to do? Are the teachers doing what they used to do? No, no one is. No one is.
Right.
And I would say our hearts break every day because of that. And we're trying to make something look like it used to look, and it can't.
Right.
And that's the part where I think that my colleagues and I can speak to them, and the people that I've talked with get the most frustrated because we do want it to be like it used to be. And that's the part of, I was on some of those sites, Facebook sites, where, teachers are getting criticized. And it's, they go and they're eating bonbons on the beach and they're leaving early. And I'm thinking, gosh, no one I know is doing that. And there was, I tried really hard to stay out of that. But
Good for you.
But I did say, as a teacher, I just want to let you know, I didn't see anybody doing that.
And even if one person did it, even if 5 people did it, that is a tiny fraction of the total number of people. It's the whole argument.
Right.
Well, we don't have to get into different arguments.
Sure.
But the point is, even if you had 10 people who did that, that's what? Under 1% of the total teacher population, right. And that's well under 1% of the teacher and paraeducator population and administrator population. It's a tiny fraction of the employment base.
Yeah.
And as we see constantly, the fringes, right, the exceptions get blown so out of proportion. And it's really, I can imagine how frustrating it is as somebody who is trying to do your best. And you've been at the administration level. How long were you a principal?
I was a principal for 8 years.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. It was long enough for me to realize it wasn't the job for me.
Right.
And I will put that out there publicly for sure. You don't have to cut that.
No, there's something people think that educating and administrating are just, synonymous. Like, it's almost like they're interchangeable. And whenever I tell, this always happens, whenever I tell people I'm a tutor, they're like, oh, do you work for a center? I'm like, no, I'm independent. They're like, oh, do you have people working for you? And I instantly say, no, I don't. There are no employees here. I do it. Like, oh, well, you should start a center because my sister, blah, blah, or like my cousin or blah, blah, or my son went to the center. They had like 30. It's like, okay, I have one skill set, and it's making fun of 16-year-olds. Okay, 2, making fun and doing math, right? Like, that's it. I'm very good at English too. But the point is, I'm not equipped to manage people, and I'm going to be best at doing the thing I'm happiest doing, and I'm happiest working with young people and helping them succeed. So the whole idea that it's kind of like, oh, well, you were a principal, it's the same as being a teacher. It's like,
right.
No.
Right.
No.
Right. And I guess the other part too is there are people that are killing it and doing so great. And like, as a teacher myself, my son's a senior at San Ramon High. My daughter is a junior. When it was time for their back to school night, my husband goes in one room and does my daughter, I do my son. And as I'm watching one of my son's teachers, now she's an AP teacher, she's amazing. She's sitting in like this super cool room with guitars all over. Like, you can tell this person is awesome. And she's the kind of influence you want on your kid. Yes. And so she's saying, I've got 2 young kids, and I'm going to be honest with you, parents. I am always here in the room during the class time. But on Google Classroom, I always post the lesson because every night after my kids go to bed, I videotape that lesson. And I videotape that lesson because I want each of my classes that I teach to get the full lesson. Because sometimes my kids might run in and I can't control that. So they're going to get this incredibly awesome lesson that I've prepared and that I sit and I record for them, and it's me and I give the lesson. And there's also work to go along with that. And every day I will sit here and I'm going to be in the room and I'm going to be interacting with your kids as they're watching that lesson. Once in a while, I might have to run out. And I apologize for that, but that's the way that this is working for me right now. And I'm really sorry. And my husband works right. And then there's the stream of apologies. And all I could think of when I got off that meeting was, that woman is a rock star. And those are the stories that you don't hear. Which I think, and then another parent's like, and don't you have an Ivy League education? And so we're not talking about, which was kind of an aside to kind of like boost her up by this other parent. But I just kept thinking, I don't care where you went to school. You like, get it.
You're killing yourself.
You are killing yourself. You are sacrificing your family. And I think those are the pieces that, as teachers, we're really working hard to try and do. And I think that sometimes that gets a little lost because there might be someone who might let kids, we've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to let you go and work on your independent work or whatever. And I've heard that. I've heard parents say that to me. And I'm like, we gotta cut them a little slack, right, and understand that. Also, sometimes the pacing of teaching remotely is also one of those things where you're talking into an abyss a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're not getting the feedback. So what could be a 1-hour lesson in person might only be 40 minutes when you're doing it through a screen because you're not getting the interaction.
Right. Everything becomes condensed. Mm-hmm. And when you condense things like that, not only do you lose the questions, okay, but you lose the opportunity to have human interactions, like making a joke, right? But now nobody's talking back, nobody's asking questions, so you can't make your joke. And when you try, and say you have 3 jokes that you're going to tee up, right? You try your first one, you don't hear anything. Well, all of a sudden the other 2 go out the window because you don't want them to land flat again. I mean, God, the only thing worse than that is getting rejected by like some girlfriend in high school. Like, it's so heartbreaking when you're really trying, you get so little feedback, and then you're like, well, look, I'm just not going to take those shots because you don't want to lose face in front of your students too. Like you can't be that person who's just an idiot, right? So you kind of default to, all right, I'm going to just keep it like meat and potatoes, real straight shooter here, but then all of a sudden it becomes this very robotic, I'm just giving you the information, which is not the way education works.
And the other part too is, and I found this with 5th graders, they tune out and they leave. So they'll have their cameras off and their mics off, and I'll be like, hey, Jimmy, you there? And I don't have anyone in my class named Jimmy, so I was kind of running through what name can I use tonight hey, Jimmy, are you there? And everyone else is sitting there. Jimmy, we're on number 10. What's the answer to number 10? I'm like, okay, Jimmy's not there. I will send his home team an email tonight.
Yeah, right. It's so tough.
And lots of times I don't send the home team an email because I just feel like, what am I going to do? Like inundate these parents with, hey, your kid wasn't online again today. So there's this, because then the parents have been amazing. The ones that I have talked with and worked with have been amazing. So I want to start there. But there's also that I'm always the jerk who's sending the emails about your kids not doing this. And we're all struggling and we're all trying to figure this out. And so is that what I want to do? Do I want to be that guy that keeps sending these emails? So if it becomes a big deal, sure. And I've said that to parents too. If it's something I think I can work out, we'll work it out. But if I feel like I need to involve you and I send you that email, please help me.
Right. And again, you're in a terrible situation because then if you wait 3 or 4 instances and then you send the email and the parent fires back, like, well, this has never happened before. And you're like, well, it's kind of happened like 3 or 4 times. And they're like, why didn't you tell me the first time? And it's just like, oh, God, I can't win. But again, it's that I keep coming back when I'm thinking through this. It's always so evident that we weren't designed to do this, right? And you're a union member, correct?
Yes.
So I was thinking about Ann Katzberg today and the dynamic with the union and the teachers in general, and it's kind of like, look, nobody, I guarantee you, I don't know Ann well at all. I mean, I've met her once, and she was great, and we chatted for a long time. There's no way Ann Katzberg signed up to be a union president and was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be in charge of this ship going through a pandemic. That'd be awesome. Right. And the union, the union got put in such an odd position because here it's charged with taking care of its members, okay? And taking care in whatever way, it's none of my affair. They determine what their priorities are, and be that more counselors or in this situation, more health things. And, teachers are concerned. There's nothing that would drive a teacher who normally teaches very happily in an in-person class onto remote and to refuse to come back to a classroom unless they were very worried, right? I mean, obviously, this is something that some people are very, very concerned about. And there's no way that Ann Katzberg and the other union reps went into these jobs saying, okay, this union is going to morph into one of the seemingly roadblocks for the entire community. Nobody thought they would be influencing the fate of 100,000 people. It's kind of like, well, look, we want, smaller student-to-teacher ratios. We want more counselors. We want more supplies. We want more of this. I'm going to fight for those things. Maybe a pay raise. But, it's just... The union became this thing that it wasn't intended to be. The system was not designed to take that kind of pressure and make those kinds of decisions.
Right. Well, and I would say, too, I am on the executive board, so I'm one of the
I had no idea.
Yeah. So I'm one of...
Wait, am I right? I'm assuming you did not go on to the executive board with the intent of, shepherding us through a pandemic.
No, I actually, but as an administrator, I was able to watch how the union supports teachers. And I think that's really important. I think that there are amazing administrators out there that really want to help and support teachers. And I think that there are some people who don't necessarily play by the rules. And so I do feel like a union is very important. I'm at a point in my career, I've got 2 teenagers. They don't want to be around me most of the time. So I have a lot of free time. And
I'm so terrified. I have a 9-year-old, and I'm just so... I'm not looking forward for that time.
But I have to say, I want to be around them. They just want to be around their friends.
I know. They just don't like you at a certain point. It's so unfair. You wiped their butts and you fed them for 18 years, and they're like, Mom, you're not even chopped liver. Just go away.
But they'll come back, I hope. That's what my friends tell me. They'll come back. But anyway, I would say, so first I want to say, SRVEA is all the people you love in school, right? So SRVEA isn't Ann Katzberg. It isn't me. It isn't any one person, because it's everyone who is a member of SRVEA. And 99% of the teachers and counselors working in our schools are members of SRVEA. So I want to make sure that everybody who's listening understands that Ann's not SRVEA. Unfortunately, I think she became a target because there was a perception that there was some things that the union was saying, no, we're not going to do that. But I would say that what SRVEA's goal is always is to make the best environment for learning for kids. And when we were, and I know you've had some of my amazing, awesome friends on here who have really been strong about getting our kids back into school, making sure that they go. And I agree with that. I hope that the beginning of this podcast is put that into perspective.
Is that the trash talking I was doing about teenagers and torturing their parents, or
what? The beginning
of the podcast?
No, I was referring to I definitely want kids. I think it's important to have them in school.
Of course, you volunteered to be a hybrid teacher. Yes. You put yourself in that position.
So I guess the part though that's really, really important is we got to do it in a safe way that's responsible and respectful to the environment. So when the school board decided, all right, let me back up for a second. In November, we asked parents, do you want to be hybrid? Right. Do you want to be remote? Parents made a decision. So those decisions then impacted teacher placement. So once we get those pieces of paper in. Everybody knows what they want to be. Teachers start getting assigned.
Oh,
sorry about that. My hands are moving. And so once the teachers, and that took several weeks because it was who's going to get assigned to where and who could do hybrid, who wants to do, what's this going to look like, who has underlying health conditions themselves. I mean, there was a lot that went into the placement of teachers. So then after that, it was, oh no, we've got like a week or two left before the winter break, and we're supposed to be coming back and putting this into place. So then it was, we got to come up with a safety plan. How are kids going to walk around campus? What's recess going to look like? So there were so many things that just hadn't been done yet. So when the school board made the decision, and of course we're spiking, our numbers are spiking.
Right. And let's be clear, the school board made the decision.
Absolutely,
SRVEA
they
did not make the decision. You guys justifiably got to have input.
Yep.
Right? Like that's only fair. But you did not make the decision.
SRVEA can make, SRVEA gives input. SRVEA has a voice at the table.
Yes.
In theory, on all of these things, but the school board ultimately makes the decisions on all of these things.
Right.
Now, so when the school board made the decision, and that was based on, I think it was our health.
I think there were a number of things, right?
So our numbers were spiking. Yeah. There was people just genuinely nervous about if we go back to hybrid now. Even the hybrid people were saying, I put my kid hybrid. I'm a little nervous about this. So the decision was made to delay it, which I think was the smartest thing, because what happened in that time was we were able to really put in thoughtful plans. We were able to say, when your kids come to school, this is what it's going to look like for them. We made videos. We made all the classrooms. Everything got wrapped in plastic. Like my classroom looks like a meat locker with all the bookshelves are covered in plastic. But I think, and again, you and I talked earlier just about the evolution of COVID-19 and what did we know in the beginning and what do we know now? And no one had all the answers. And so we just knew that at school sites, and this was done in cooperation with upper management, principals, teachers, everyone working together to put these safety plans into place. And now people are saying, holy cow, it's really working. We had a parent meeting the week before we came back, brought kids back, and it was virtual, and it was hybrid parents and teachers, and our principal was there, and we were all talking about, this is what it's going to look like, and here's the map of the school, here's how we walk around here, and we're going to have 2 people walking by in this place, and this is and it was one of the parents was like, holy cow, there's not a thing you haven't thought of. And our principal just said, we've had some time to think about it, we've really spent time on it. And so we were able to put this really comprehensive safety plan into place. We know how it's going to work. We've thought it through. We've run scenarios. And so then we all were so much more confident with the opening of school. And so I think that's the place. And we're at and I love that middle and high school got to come back last week. That was so great. And so now everyone who's wanted to be back at school is back. At least for a portion of the day. Not how they want to be back. Not how I want them to be back, but we're getting there.
Right. Of course. Look, nothing's the way people want it to be.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, look, at least we're getting there. At least you are getting some in-person connection. At least you are. Several of my students are part of the leadership program. And what's it called when you're like the upperclassmen and you introduce the younger classmen?
Link Crew.
There we go.
Link
Crew.
It is. Yeah, my daughter was in Link Crew last week.
Right.
Yeah.
So several of my students are in Link Crew at like San Ramon, and they were saying how the freshmen came onto campus and they had never been there, and they're taking them through the 3-story building, pointing out the parking lot, and like, oh, this is this teacher's car, that's teacher's car, and just taking them through, and look, maybe it's not a full day, but you're walking through campus, you're meeting people, you're interacting with people. For people that like leading, right? For people who like helping. You don't join Link Crew if you don't like helping people, right? And to be able to finally do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And the freshmen got to be freshmen. Right. Because until that moment, they hadn't walked on their high school campus.
Right.
Pretty amazing stuff.
Right. And we're getting there.
We're getting
there. We're getting there. It's not it's not in a way that anyone is happy about. And
No.
I'm very because look, I guarantee there are some people who feel like we still shouldn't be on campus, and there are some people who feel like we should have been on campus 6 months ago.
Right.
Even if you're not on those two extremes, the people in the middle are not happy about the way the entire community is now, even if they're kind of like, well, look, I'm pretty flexible, like we've been okay, it hasn't been the worst for us. But they know the damage that has gone on, and they know that nothing's going to be the same kind of after this. Like, how do you see us getting through this and bringing a community back together? And of course, we're talking years and years, but what are the steps that we need?
Gosh, it's a good question. And I'm more optimistic than it's going to take years. Oh, sure.
Peppermint tea down the wrong. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, that's okay. I'm more optimistic. I don't think it's going to take years.
I love hearing that.
I really don't. I think that it's going to take schools being open more. I think it's going to take community building. It's going to take trying to get back to a little bit more normal, and connecting. And in your point earlier, just about being able to see someone and watch them nod and understand that there's a story behind the pain that you might see on their face, or they're so excited about something their kid is doing at school and they actually get to see it. I mean, I have some friends, and myself included. My daughter was in her first cross country race, and we got to go watch. And it was one of those things where everyone's got masks on and you're a little nervous, but you're so excited that you're there. And it's just the ability to cheer on my daughter, her teammates. It's an amazing feeling as a parent. So I take that, and when I'm starting to hear people talk about in the sports arena and being able to go out on the field and see their kids, we're gonna get there. And I think that once we can figure out how can we build some community back in our schools, I think that's gonna do it. Because I feel like, and as a parent, I could say this too, I love my kids' teachers. I may not tell them every day, I may not see them all the time, but they're amazing people for my kids. And I feel like the community is so supportive. We are so lucky. And I tell people all the time, I've taught in several different places, worked in different districts, and I chose to live here because our schools are amazing. Our community is so incredible and supportive of each other and our kids, and that community is not far away. I think there were a couple of things. I think that we had some political stuff that was happening in our community. I think that there were, and I say political meaning actual, like politics and the elections and things like that. But then there's the politics of our school board, and there's the politics of, so if that can calm down a little bit, I think that it's not going to take very much. I believe that people are good. I believe that people's hearts are in the right places, and even when people are getting worked up on Facebook, I always try to come from it as a place of, they're talking about their kids,
right? The
most precious members of their family, and I have to understand how that is so much emotion for everyone.
Right.
And so if we can all kind of say, okay, let's try to move past that and get back together to what, and that's why I think the part about SRVEA is the teachers that your kids love. So how can you hate SRVEA? How can you hate the organization that's 99% of the people, teachers and counselors and nurses and psychologists that work in our district? You can't, because we love those kids too, and parents know that.
Right.
So I do feel like it's not years. I'd like to think, this next year we'll be rebuilding, and then we'll be getting back to more of what we felt before, I hope.
Right, because the community at the school really does bring everyone else together. Like the first Monte Vista San Ramon, like, big football game where everybody can go, that'd be great. Those
They're
would
going
be
to try and
great
do it
things.
this year.
They are.
But I think it's only, I don't know, this is kind of off topic.
2 people per household or something.
And the seniors, I think, can go.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
I think. That's the rumor I heard.
That would be great if they can pull that off.
Yeah, would be really fun.
The 18-year-olds are immortal anyway. Just like, gosh.
I know.
Just don't make them watch it on Zoom.
I know.
Just anything but
That's
Zoom.
That's right. Do in person.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, 100% fair to say, look, this organization is made up of people that you guys love and support your kids.
And love you back.
Right. I think the issue is that, again, I don't think SRVEA was designed to be at the center of this wrangle.
Nor should it be.
Nor should it be.
Right.
Again, I don't think anybody wants that responsibility or planned on having that responsibility. So I think the frustration is not that I dislike SRVEA because I dislike the teachers. I think the frustration was kind of, I dislike SRVEA because how is it that they're all of a sudden calling some of the shots? And there are a lot of people that attribute a lot more power to SRVEA than they actually had. And again, I don't know for sure, but I'm just willing to bet. It's like, you probably didn't make, again, the school board made the call.
Yep.
Right? For better or for worse, it's kind of like, look, that's the school board.
Right.
They've been making the calls. So I think the frustration, a large part, one caller, I think it was the January, I can't remember which meeting it was, but one caller called in and said, look, the problem is that SRVEA has more power now than it ever has before. And it struck me immediately because I'm like, yeah, okay, even if I agree with you, do you think they really want that? He's like, they have more bargaining power than ever before because if they don't show back up, it's like, okay, buddy, I understand that, but the school board still made the decision, right? It wasn't SRVEA's call, and SRVEA didn't sign up to be in the middle of the pandemic managing it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking about, more power than before.
Well, like if a teacher if SRVEA decides, hey, look, we're going to go on strike because we need, raises and we need this or we need whatever the benefits for the school are, right? There's a certain amount of ripple effect that has on the community.
Sure.
Right? But if SRVEA in the middle of this said, hey, we're not going to support coming back to school with our teachers, that affected tens and tens and tens of thousands of people. Now, again, the irony is you guys weren't making the call. That was the thing. Like, SRVEA wasn't making the call to go back to school or not. Newsom kept all of those options out for months and months and months. As Dr. Malloy pointed out, there was a tiny, brief period of time in October when if everybody jumped perfectly, you could have landed schools back. Right. Some people back in school, fine. And then there was the decision in December. But aside from that, it's not like we were regulated by the state.
Yeah, there was definitely, there were regulations in place. We couldn't come back to school.
Right. Even if SRVEA wanted, even if every single teacher was on campus saying, send the kids back right now, it would have been illegal to do it.
Yep. Yeah. And I guess that's the part, is that the school board makes the decisions. The management team, including Dr. Malloy, he brings recommendations to them. If you watch a board meeting, that's how it goes. He says, here's our recommendation, makes a presentation, questions are asked, and then a decision is made if it's a voting issue that day. But I think as part of that recommendation, the hope is always teachers are considered, the voices are heard, should be, right? Because, and I guess the other part that I keep saying to people when, it's, I know your internet in your room isn't that great, but we'll come back, in a couple of days. I'm like, no, you got to come back tomorrow because we need this tomorrow. Right. Oh, well, the custodian can clean at this time or that. No. Teachers are starting at 8:00 and we've got kids and we've got a big span in the middle of the day where our rooms are being sprayed down with a cleaner and we got to be out of that room when we're changing. There's no one has done this except the teachers that are in the classrooms right now. So more power, I don't know, but I think it should be a trusted voice, because usually in a typical year, principals can say, oh yeah, I was a teacher. I know how this goes.
Right.
But there is no one in any management position that can say they've ever done this. No one's done this.
Right.
Which is why I think or I used to be a teacher before I had children, or I was a retired teacher or whatever. But unless you're in a classroom right now, you don't know what this is. You can think you do, and you can have pieces of it, and you can try to understand, but it's one of the teachers have to be listened to, because we have your kids' stories, we have your kids' hearts, we're responsible for them, and we take that very seriously. And so that is why it's really important, I think, is SRVEA's voice more powerful? I don't think so. I think that it's, there's this balance of hearing all the voices, and the school board makes their decision. And parents are a huge part of that too. And I know you listen to the board meetings just like I do, and all the calls in and all the different perspectives. And I think that it is so amazing to hear all of that. And then to be a school board member and have to make the decisions, I don't envy that. But at the same time, we're in a really interesting, challenging time where different perspectives are really important. But I think the people in the room with your kids,
they need to at least be heard. Right? Like I am 100% in support of that. And again, I think what the caller who was saying that SRVEA has more power than it ever has, I think what he's referring to is just the time that like if you take a snapshot of that time where it's kind of like, look, there's a question about whether the teachers will even be willing to return or not. And everybody's looking at that, mental health problems are spiking, going through the roof, and cases were spiking, going through the roof. So people are freaking out. Health risks are left and right on both sides, right? I mean, just everywhere. There are all these problems, and then everybody was, the administration and the school board were also saying, well, we need to listen to teachers as well. People are like, how can you listen to teachers? What about me? So I think I don't think that guy was trying to say, and I'm certainly not trying to say that all of a sudden you've gained this power like the government, they're tracking us or something like that. I just think in that particular situation, again, the system was not designed for these stresses. There were not checks and balances set up for this. Nobody knew how to navigate it. And how could you, unless we go through this again, how could we really know, who would be better equipped for it? The regulation even coming from the state was changing all the time. Dr. Moore made that very clear. He's like, look, they change, we retool. We're just about to pull the trigger, so to speak, and then something changes again, and then we have to retool again. And then you have different people advocating for their, you're talking about sports. I was talking to Coach Schramm from Monte Vista, and he was saying, look, these athletes are not, the need for these athletes is different than the need for an English class, because athletes have a shelf life. So we're comparing these California athletes who are missing their junior and senior years, and they're trying to get highlight reels out to go to college, and they've been working up until this point in their life, as athletes, and maybe some of them have athletic aspirations in college. They are going to be compared to people from Utah and Idaho and Texas that are playing and getting highlight reels. So they have a shelf life. So we need to get seasons in somehow. Even if it's a short season, we need some film, we need some capacity to showcase these athletes, because their concerns and their aspirations should be considered like other people, and that's slightly different than the standard student. So you have all these different people advocating for these very complex situations that likely not every person walking around in their head has all of this together. They're like, okay, we have athletes, we have musicians, we have people that are academics, we have people who are snagging these extra classes, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my gosh, man. I mean, it's so much to put all together. It's no wonder almost no one is happy. Like, how could you be happy with all of these things? It almost seemed like whenever you did something for someone or one group, the other groups were like, you either took something away from me or you prioritized them instead of me. It's like, oh my gosh, there are 100 different groups. We got to start making headway somewhere.
Yeah. And I think that's when we came back our first day of hybrid, there were balloons and welcome signs, and
I saw that. That was beautiful.
Yes. And it was great. Unless you were a parent or a student looking on Facebook in your remote. and that was brought up to me because I didn't think of it, and I should have, but I didn't, because in my world, I'm a hybrid teacher. I was out there dancing with balloons and singing on the first day and come on in. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. But at the same time, there's a group of kids that are at home. Now, probably in elementary school, they're not going on social media, but the middle school and high school kids last week certainly were.
Gosh, what a perfect example
of
just a lose-lose situation.
You can't. You want to celebrate those kids. And I would say, too, every family has a story, right? So you have kids who would be dying to come back to school but might live with grandma. Right. And when their family had to make that decision in November, our numbers were spiking. We knew the vaccine was coming around. We weren't sure when. So parents made decisions in November that now are coming to fruition in March. And so in a total different environment. And so those kids whose parents made those decisions for them, for the right reasons, and I don't doubt parents make decisions they always make the right decisions.
Let's
for their
make
family.
the assumption that they are batting 1,000. They're perfect. They made the right decision.
And so now we've got kids at home saying, gosh, look at all those kids going to school. Look at all my friends on Instagram posting these pictures. Look at you. So I feel like you can't win. And I think your point of it's a losing situation because you want to celebrate being back for the kids that are back. You want them to feel welcome. You want the kids who are stepping on their high school campus as freshmen for the first time. You want link crew. You want all that stuff for them.
Yes.
But there's a whole group of kids who aren't getting it, who aren't getting that same experience. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I've got some students that stayed remote who send me emails all the time. I miss you so much. How are you doing? How's your class? Or like when we had to do that last day, I mean, it was online, of course, of separating. One parent said, can we just come down to the office? I have something for you. My daughter would like to drop it off. And it was sobbing. A 10-year-old sobbing. I'm crying. The mom's trying because it's hard. And when you're in a classroom and you make relationships with kids and they're upset or they don't go the way you think they're going to go, it's hard. And that's the part, I think, that there's these little stories within this situation that you're right, that you do make the best decisions that you can for your family. As a mom, I have 2 teenagers, a junior and a senior, and we just sat down and said, what do you guys want to do? And the remote was working for them. My daughter's a junior. She knows this is it for her college applications. And she said, this is working. And at the time in November, when we had to make the decision, it was touted as you would have 2 days that you would have to be on your own as a high school student, and you would have work you'd need to do within those days. And you would be on campus for 2 days if you decided to go back. And if you stayed remote, you would have your classes every day. And she just said, I don't think I could do 2 days on my own. I think I'd get distracted. I think I would, I need to have the structure of the day, and I want to stay remote. My son just said, I'm a senior. I'm fine staying remote. Great. They made that decision. And it's working for them. But I also see the kids that it wasn't working for and now are in my class. Right. And that's a whole nother piece too. It's hard.
Yeah. It's impossible. I mean, you see the balloons and you see the signs and you see the smiley faces up and it's like, welcome back and all this stuff. And you can also just imagine the kid who's not getting welcome back. But this is the nature of our world, right? Like, this is the human experience. There's not, I'm so taken recently by people talking about disparities, and it's kind of like, how can we eliminate, all of the disparities in the world? And I grew up in Concord, single mom, and I went to Ignacio Valley High School, that dynamite academic institution. And we could see De La Salle across the creek, like through the fence, and it was like, oh, touch me. But, it was very rough, right? And I very fortunately went to UC Berkeley, and now I live in Danville, and it's one of those things that I think about, because it's kind of like, okay, well, how could you eliminate the disparities and in between, say, the students that I work with, right? And I've always been a lifelong athlete, okay? And one grand thing that I've thought about is when I was a swimmer, okay? And I did a lot of sports, but I swam in particular. And I was captain of the swim team, and I was an okay swimmer. And I have swimmers in my classes very frequently that are fantastic. I mean, going to D1 schools and everything, and I look at them and I'm like, God, you swim really fast. And they're on year-round teams, which cost money, and the resources to get the students get the athletes. That's yep. Right. And I didn't have a car, right? And there are all these other things like that. And one thing in particular is that I remember one day I was at swim practice. So I was a senior, and I was kind of dragging, and my coach grabbed me out of the water and he was like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't eat lunch." And he was like, "What do you mean you didn't eat lunch?" I'm like, "I didn't have lunch. I don't know what to tell you." He's like, "Well, what'd you have for breakfast?" I'm like, "I didn't," because I just hadn't eaten that day. And so here I'm at swim practice trying to swim like 7,000 yards. Mm-hmm. And, he grabs some apples and he hands them to me. He's like, "Eat these, sit there, and then get back in the water." I'm like, okay, munching on these apples. And I see my students come to class, say after swim practice, and I have protein shakes for them, when we could eat, and I'd have pizza, and I'd have all these things. And I often wondered, if I had had the resources they had, could I have been a better swimmer? Now, of course, that seems like a silly thing, but I think those are very impactful years when you're 18, 19, 20, wondering, is this me, or was this a compilation of my circumstances? Was I just like a substandard athlete compared to these kids? And so I think frequently about, is there a way to eliminate disparities so the me doesn't exist? And I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible because you have freedom, and parents have freedom, and you have unfortunate circumstances and families. Parents get divorced, and you have, my dad was first generation Mexican American, so he did not grow up. He grew up with even less than I had, and my kids will grow up with more than I had. So we're making progress, but there are inherent unfair situations in just the human experience.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think we have homeless students in our district. I think that lots of people don't know that.
Yes.
We have students who live in group homes. We have families that live in very small apartments without internet. And so, I mean, that's been another piece of this. I see everybody's home. And is it fair? And this has been a big conversation. Is it fair to have kids leave their cameras on and make them have their cameras on when they're in the middle of a kitchen with an ice box behind them and parents walking, So I think that I guess is part of what teachers fight for too. And Serbia fights for that, is how do we better manage equity in our district?
Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah.
So you have people of varying resources.
Sure.
Now, obviously, if you're dealing with a fifth grader or even a senior, it's not their fault.
No,
right?
Gosh,
like
no.
It's not their shtick, nor is it Danville's fault or Alamo's fault or San Ramon's fault.
No.
So when people talk about fighting for equity, mm-hmm. It's kind of like, how do you mean?
Well, and I would say equity is giving people what they need for success. So equity for the students who sit in your room and get your tutoring because their parents can afford to pay for it, and they're already great swimmers and they're already great students. They might not need an after-school teacher to help them with their work, right? So I think and that's just a very simplistic answer. But the greater piece is, equity with our LGBTQ population. I mean, we have students in our district that are kicked out of their homes by their parents and they live on the trail because their parents believe that that's not my child. They wouldn't, that we don't accept that lifestyle, and so you can't be in our home. And those are real life things. And so think about those kids when you've got to do school online, or you've got to do school half the time at school and half the time at home, or kids whose are elementary and their parents have to physically go to work, whether they're nurses or doctors or whatever, but they, and maybe they're working in a restaurant. I don't know, but they're kids who are at home trying to do school on their own. And then you've got a teacher like me who's saying, hey, the paraeducator's running a group at 1:35, make sure you're there. And they're trying to make themselves lunch.
Right. They're trying to find food.
Right. So while we are this affluent, supportive, amazing, awesome community, we've got work to do when it comes to that. And I think that the first step is just recognizing it's there, because I think that I get a picture of our school district. I mean, I've been in the school district for a while and worked in several different schools in different capacities, so I've gotten to see a cross section of who we are. And there are lots of people who are struggling, and they hide it, and they try really hard to hide it, because we're not a school district. I've worked in school districts where they have, a dentist who comes and works with kids and, does an exam, because that's part of what the school offers. But that's not here, because we don't necessarily need it for the majority of our students.
I was going to say, for a lot of people, we don't need it for enough percentage of people to necessitate,
and I think
those resources. So
your point to our ed foundations are raising like AP Calc A classes at $100 and something thousand a person, or a full-time FTE, one full-time teacher, and we've got kids who are just trying to get by and have food. And so I think that's a piece that as a community we've got to start looking at too. Right. Is how do we do that and support our kids that way too, and in looking for that and making it okay to reach out. One of the things as a classroom teacher is we go on these, historically, not this year, we go to outdoor ed, right? We take kids to science camp for a week, and it's beautiful and amazing and awesome, and it also comes with a price tag of $250 a kid, right? And we call it a donation, and we say, if you need help, come talk to us. This is just a donation. Everyone will go. And we've worked really hard where I am to say, I don't want to know the kids who aren't able to pay. Like, we have the checks come into us, I give them right to the office, and then if kids don't pay, they still go. I mean, we've made, in our PTA supports that. And so I think those are the things, and it's no one knows, no names, no one knows who pays, who doesn't pay, because it's so important,
right, that
everybody go. And there are some times when parents will say, oh, I don't want my child to go, and I'll do a follow-up and say, hey, I am not making an assumption. I just want to put this out there. If this is anything to do with money, we've got your back. No one needs to know. You just say the word and it's done. And sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, I feel so awful. I can't, because, nope, no, there will never be another word. And your child will go, get me the permission slip tomorrow, send in the medical papers, and we'll be good to go.
Right.
So those are the pieces that I think sometimes parents also won't tell you for fear of letting people know their personal business.
Right. People hold it so close.
Especially here. Everything's beautiful and perfect.
Maybe at your house.
No,
my house
but
is screaming and slamming doors and
I say that with laughter, right? Yeah, and it is. It's hard. And that, I think, is hard for our kids sometimes too. It's hard to be mediocre here.
Yeah, mediocrity is it's not a thing.
No.
And especially when it comes to your family life, right? Like everybody has some crazy family, but there are aspects of certain people's lives and their families that are more embarrassing or seemingly embarrassing that they don't want to share with people. I think as a community though, I think society in general, another conflict that I see is it's really hard to help people. Okay, and I've tried. Yeah. This is the thing that keeps getting me. So, for instance, in my class, right, and I'll have like an extra seat or two, or this last year, like almost all of them, extra seats, right? But the point is, I've reached out to high schools in the area and said, hey, I have extra seats for this coming up test, and I don't care who it is, I don't care how you identify them, but I could, I'll give you 6 seats, right, or whatever it is for this test. And almost always, there was one round where there was an exception, and I actually did fantastic. I got to work with 4 fantastic students. One of them, by the way, happened to be formerly homeless, and she had been not picked up, but she had essentially been like adopted by this family. She developed a friendship with this girl, and the family found out about her situation, and they took her in. And I was like, oh my God. And by the way, I didn't ask for any of this information. She shared it.
Sure.
And I was just so pleased that I got to help her. But almost always when I try to do that, you hit this unbelievable barrier of red tape where we can't divulge students' names. Yeah. It's, okay, why are you doing this? And, all of these different things. So because there was a girl a couple years ago that I worked with her on SAT prep, and they lived in a nice little townhouse. It was like a 2-bedroom place. Sure. And I was going to her house and working with her, and her mom worked, and the girl and I worked very well together, and she said, hey, can you help us with college essays too? I said, yeah, absolutely, because again, I was doing the seminars at Santa Ramon and Monte Vista, and they heard about it, and they said, well, can you just help us on the side? I said, yeah, sure. So it turns out she had this horrific upbringing. Her dad was a substance abuser and worse, and there were just all of these things that obviously she did not want to share with just anybody. And the mom wrote me this note that was almost like an apology, like, I'm sorry we're dropping all of this on you, basically what you're saying. I know Danville seems very perfect, but, it's just not that way. And it's so painful because you realize that's the kid that really needs help. And she got into her best schools. She was super excited. And it was just so great to be able to help her with that and be a very small part of her success. But it's so hard to find those people, right? When you're talking about equity, it's like, just tell me where to go. Tell me what kid to help. Tell me who to work with to bring equity. And it's just, I feel like society in general is, everybody suspects something. Everyone's like, what's his angle? Yeah. What is it? Why is he doing this? Yeah. What's the deal?
There's got to be trust for sure.
Right.
Even
with people who know me, who have known me in the high schools for well over a decade, it's like, I have nothing up my sleeve. Like, I'm just offering you these. And then it goes to an administrator who hasn't heard of me. And, the other person's like, no, Matt's great. And the administrator, well, we still have these problems. We can't, Yeah. It's a train wreck. Yeah. And as a community, who loses? The people who need it the most.
Yeah. And we lose as a community because I think there are amazing, awesome, incredible people who maybe feel like their voice isn't heard. And that, I guess, is the part that why I love getting to know families and people. And, I have some friends that, we may not agree on everything, but I feel like, and that's your piece of looking at people and talking with them, but just like sometimes I'll say, so let me tell you the other side of this fight you want to take on for your own personal kid, in saying, whatever the angle is. because not every kid has these opportunities. Yeah, it is. And that's the part that breaks my heart too, is I think we've also come to a place where we look at all of the things that schools do for us as communities and globally. Sometimes it is where the dentist goes. Sometimes it's where kids' clothes get washed. Sometimes it's where you get meals for your family, perhaps. It's where your kid might get counseling for, depression or whatever it is. So I feel like that's the other part that's happening. There was an incident last year where a teacher was teaching and a parent was kind of lurking, and then she heard some things that warranted CPS calls, but it was the middle of COVID and the kid didn't have an out.
Right.
They're in that house with that situation. And so, and then you think, we're the people who see kids that have bruises.
Right.
We're the people who say, something doesn't seem right. And then you can say, hey, how's it going? And if you have the relationship and the trust, sometimes kids will tell you things that will allow you to get them help if they need it, which is the other part that just shuts down in this environment when we're not seeing kids in person.
Yes, and that's something that I think is so woefully underappreciated. That
people don't know. They don't know.
You have to have somebody students have to have somebody who they trust, who is not a family member, who they can talk to. I had he was a tremendous student. This was right before he got his senior year. So he was a senior second semester in 2020. So he was finishing up right as COVID hit. Yeah. And he had moved from out of state in senior year, and he started coming to class, and he was kind of quiet, but then I realized he was very bright. And then as he got to know me, he opened up more and more, and it turned out he was drinking like 5 days a week. He had a horrible home life, lived, went to Monte Vista, and he had nowhere to go because his parents worked, right? And he would just go home. He was very bright, and he only had a couple classes, so he would be home by 1 o'clock, and it's just him twiddling his thumbs. And so it was like he'd just start drinking. And it killed me when I heard that. I was like, oh my God, he's not going to survive through this year. Like, if you're drinking at 1 o'clock Monday through Thursday, and then who knows what on the weekend, you're not going to make it, man. So again, that in a very limited capacity, I was able to pull him aside. I had him come to class early one day. I was like, listen, you can come to class anytime you want. My classroom is always open for you. And he would come here for like 8 hours at a time, and he'd sit and he'd do his homework and everything. But having that out for a student, like you're saying, the kids had nowhere to go. And that was one of the greatest tragedies of COVID, that you had students who so desperately relied on having teachers, having an adult that could see them, having somebody who could see through the facade and connect with them. And just having that, man, it breaks my heart to think about.
And I would even say in a typical home, right, where there's no abuse, kids just need to get out. We all just need to get out. I mean, and like I said, the first opportunity I got to go back and teach in my classroom, I was there. I was, whatever you need me to sign, whatever test you need me to take, so I can be in the physical place where I feel like a teacher.
Right.
It's not my dining room, for sure.
And I think, obviously this has gotten a little dark, but
I know.
But I think when we're coming out of this, I think these are genuinely the things that people are going to have to remember about their neighbors if we're to become a community again. If we're really going to see each other as human beings, that we're trying our best, right? And trying to manage the horrific situation we're in, we're going to have to recognize, look, it was probably hell for you, wasn't it? And don't even, acknowledge yes, no, whatever. Like, just assume that person was going through the worst phase of his or her life, and then start to judge them. Because if you come at it from that standpoint, all of a sudden, your judgments seem very superficial. It's like, oh, you obviously just like being a horrible person. Oh, really? do you really think that's what that person was doing?
Right.
And yeah, you're trapped. And again, I think the only way through this, where we can look at each other again and embrace a community and each other, is to realize that we've gone through a horrific experience.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Right. And it was interesting.
And for some, it still is. Let's be clear.
Oh, gosh, for sure. And I think we're still in a phase of uncertainty.
Yes.
It's still out there. There are countries closing down. There are schools in our country that have said, let's open, and then had to close, right? I mean, we've got people who think they know, people who... everyone's trying to do the best they can with the information that they have. And I think that's the part that, as a group, I read this quote today, and it was something like, our way through can't be like, go take care of yourself, take some time for you, right? That's what oh my gosh, that's what I think every teacher has heard 500 times. Oh, you're working so hard, go take some time for yourself.
Where am I going to go?
Well, or you're
do?
just like, I don't know what I would do. But I guess, like the quote was, it can't be take time for yourself and take self-care. It's got to be care about each other.
Right.
And that's how we get through this, is we got to look at each other as people, and we all want the best for our kids. We all want the best for our community, and I know in your heart that's what you want. No matter what you say on social media, I know this person on this side saying the same thing. We've got to just come together, because I know everyone's fighting for what they think is best for their kids and their community. And so, okay, now we're coming out of it. Let's get back to building that trust and care for each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, as somebody, you are again a large part of SRVEA. I cannot imagine the conversations amongst the top executives have been easy. I can't imagine.
I wish we were executives.
I can't imagine that you guys had answers and you felt like you were making the right calls, but you continued to make the calls. That's one of the things.
Well, and I think we weren't making calls; we were making recommendations.
No,
Yeah.
not the calls.
Yes.
You had to make a decision on what you would recommend.
Well,
you had to make decisions on what you thought would be right for your members. I'm not saying you made calls
Sure.
that regulated the school district, but the point is, it's so easy for people to criticize people in action. It's kind of like, well, look, the person turned left; they should have turned right. Blah blah. It's like, fine, take the steering wheel. Let's see how you do.
Well, and I would say, too, I don't think that even as executive board members, we weren't making decisions. We were I think we were having a conversation at a meeting today just about, we give so many surveys to get information, to direct the ship. And what are things that people are passionate about, and what's our direction, and where do we want to go as a teacher, psychologist, nurse organization, versus, what's one person's perspective. Right. So I think that's the piece too, because we all know sometimes the loudest voices aren't the voices that are more in number.
Right.
So that's the other part too, is that there's a lot of feedback. So when we say SRVEA is all of the people, it is all of the people, because even the executive board isn't making those decisions. When the executive board speaks, or Ann Katzberg speaks, it's on behalf of the information that has been culled from all of the members. Right. And and I think the other part she does well, in that when we look at our data, it's always, we received 75% of our membership voted. Of that 75%, this percent voted this way. So it's very data driven. It is not we got the feeling because 5 people called us. Right. And I think that's the part that people may not understand, is it's not Ann Katzberg. It's everyone. It's SRVEA, which is all the teachers. Yeah. Right.
And whatever you may think, whatever you think of Ann Katzberg, whatever you think of the things she said in the board meetings, what kind of president would Ann Katzberg be if she went against what the members were telling her they wanted to do? right? Like, she's likely not taking the course of action that was totally in contrast with what teachers wanted. And
No.
if she did exactly what the majority of the teachers said that are members of SRVEA, the majority, or SRVEA members, because I know they're not all teachers, if she did exactly what the majority of members said, that's exactly what she was supposed to do. Right?
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, what do you want me to do? I represent the members. I'm the president. The majority of the people who spoke up said they wanted this. I did this. Okay, so what is it like?
Right.
Was I supposed to not do that? Was I supposed to make my own call at the last minute?
Right.
And again, I'm not saying you like Ann Katzberg, you don't like Ann Katzberg. It's none of my affair. But the point is, she had a job to do. And if she didn't do that job of representing the will of those that she represents, then what good is she as the president?
Yeah, and I would say too, because I do know her, that she takes her job very seriously. It's never a fly off the cuff recommendation. It is always a very, okay, let's get everybody together. These are the things that we need information about. We need to get a survey out, or we have Wednesday meetings where she speaks to the membership and people can ask questions. And so, especially now, there's been a lot more communication. And so I feel like she is the voice of all of the members of SRVEA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I can't imagine that. I mean, just talking to the few people I have about education, talking to the varied guests that I've been very fortunate to speak with, people have given me hell and people have given me flack. And it's like, I don't even do anything to be in her position or Dr. Malloy's position, where it's kind of like you're
the
trying
principals,
your best.
I mean,
principals.
and that I think is the part for me. Like I look at our principal, who all she wants to do is support teachers and make good decisions for kids. And just
tell me what the quote good decision is.
And,
right?
and
do I put balloons up on the welcome back day or not? Because I guarantee you, no matter what I do,
someone's gonna be mad.
That's the point. There's no right decision here.
Yeah.
And everybody's figuring it out as we go. At the end of the day, everybody's trying to do their best. There's nobody out there with malicious intent. There have been people who have had loved ones pass away, and they're freaked out, and that works on both sides. You know, we've had horrendous tragedies with students who couldn't take it anymore, and that's terrible.
Yep.
And then we have, you know, the whole bit. Everyone who is upset is completely justified in being upset. But at the end of the day, I think if we can't recognize that everyone was genuinely trying, we were failing, let's say, horribly in every position, but we were trying, and we were trying our best.
I don't think we failed.
Fine. Yeah. I don't think so either. Yeah. But somebody out there is like, no, you failed for sure. It's like, fine.
Sure.
I'll take it. Take
and
the
I guess
failure.
That's the
but
piece.
Come on.
People can have their opinions, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I think we've just got to say, okay, that's my opinion. We've got to look at each other.
Right.
Live together again. And you know, I mean, the joke, my friends have some that are not teachers. Like I said, oh gosh, I just made a comment on Facebook when the person said that teachers are eating bonbons. They're like, and you know, and my friends are like, I'm going to get on that thread. Don't you worry. I got you. I'm going to watch that thread. And it's funny, or like they'll send me a text, anybody respond? Because I can take them out. I know a lot of people, right? Like, and it's very funny. Yeah, exactly. But I think as teachers, we feel the love from our kids and all in our families that we work directly with. But gosh, it's a hard world out there right now to be a teacher.
Yeah, it's hard.
And there's been a lot of bruising and battering of teachers, and it's too bad. I think that, and not just me. I think that most of the teachers just want to do a good job. We want to do the right thing by kids, and that I guess is the part that, as just the social media part's been hard. I think, like you said earlier, it's a super complex, multi-tiered, leveled anything. I mean, how you drop kids off in the morning took us hours to figure out how to do that at school. And you think, oh, well, it flows so great. Yeah, because we had about 10 hours worth of meetings about, well, if they come and get dropped off here, is it going to be safe enough? How do we keep them separated? Do we paint a little shark on the front and then they all stand on a shark? And then at a certain time, we can bring them through to the other place. And it took hours. And that was just like, how do you drop them off?
Right.
So those are the pieces that it takes time. And people, I don't know, we're just trying.
You're trying.
We're trying.
You're trying. Look, you're trying, I'm trying. I think we're all trying.
We are.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
Listen, it's almost been an hour and 45 minutes. Thank you for coming in.
You are so welcome. It was great. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully we can chat again in about a year when all this is behind us.
I would love that.
I'd love it too. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.